Let's go for it! I like the dark stuff. Give me the dark stuff. I like the dark stuff. Give me the dark stuff.
Hey there, everybody. It's me, your buddy Dave, the host here at the Dark Stuff channel. Thanks a lot for checking out the new video. On today's video, I have a guest. My guest is my good friend Joey, and she and I are sort of music pals. We've gone to a lot of concerts together over the years. We're in the my record night club together. We were on the same team, on a music trivia team at a monthly event that this bar in Omaha here had. She's from Omaha. We've known each other for a couple of years. I wanted to have her on as a guest for a while, and in this case, what we decided to do was, rather than do like a review of something new, we decided to do a different approach. We each picked out an album that used to mean a lot to us at some point when we were young, or we just really, really liked it. And now, looking back, it's like, what did we see in this record? You know, why was it so important? Because we don't really care much for it now. Then we flipped it around and did the reverse, and find an album that you used to sort of dismiss, or you didn't like, or didn't mean something to you. And now here you are at this point in your life, loving the record. And how did you ever not like it in the first place? So that's our topic. Hope you like it, everybody.
Okay.
Hey, Joey, how are you today?
Hey, Dave, how are you?
Good. This is a weird thing because we're both in Omaha, but of course, you know, you live like 10 minutes from me, but at the same time, we're doing this via the computer because we're trying to be, you know, good, responsible citizens.
Yes, indeed. Yes.
So we started talking about this a week or two ago, I guess, and toying with different concepts for the discussion. And this was really your idea of taking an album that was at one point meaningful to you, and now you sort of are reevaluating it, and maybe it's not that meaningful to you anymore. And then I think I maybe suggested, well, how about we do both at the reverse?
Right,
an album that you used to sort of not like, and now you sort of you know, really appreciate. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I think this opens up a lot of possibilities for discussions, you know, and I've like I said earlier, I revisited all these records in the last day or two just to get super familiar with them.
Yeah.
So I could hear it again, even though my two I already knew. Your two I actually didn't know, so it's going to be interesting. When we start talking about it, I'll give you my my thoughts on that. So let's start with an album that for me was a big deal when I was a kid, and I even have a physical copy right here.
There it is.
Styx Paradise Theater. This came out when I was 10 years old, and I was a dumb little kid, and I actually wrote my name in there in marker.
Hey, you know what? You gotta, you know, make sure people don't steal your records at those parties. So.
In 1981, that was a big deal. So, and by the way, this is my 45 for Too Much Time on My Hands.
Oh, nice.
Which I had back then too. So those are originals from when I was 10.
Hey, are they worth anything now?
No, because you can go to any Goodwill and find a Styx record.
I don't know. Maybe, you know, people really like that 45.
Well, you know, there is one cool thing. I'll show you. This is on the vinyl itself. I was mesmerized by this as a kid. I don't know if it's you'll be able to see it over here, but like the record is etched. Can you see that? Like it says Styx, and it has like, I'll try.
No, I can't.
Yeah, I'll try and find a picture.
I don't know. You know what? I can't really come with the lighting. Sorry.
Yeah, I'll try and find a Google picture and just impose it up there so people can see it. So when I was a
collector's
kid,
item.
What's that? Well,
the collector's item.
When I was a kid, you know, maybe that album came out when I was 10. I was a huge Styx fan. I mean, I'm talking like age 10, 11, 12, 13. Styx was my band. I mean, no question.
Oh, yeah.
I loved the shit out of that. And they were hugely popular. I mean, they were like, they had 4 or 5 triple platinum albums in a row. It's hard to imagine like how big that was in the 70s. You know, they were so huge. Now, I was a nerdy kid. I know, surprise, but like, I thought Styx was sort of like intellectual in a way. Like I saw them as smarter than the average rock band, and that kind of appealed to me in a way. now I look back on it, I find that kind of silly because some of their concepts are sort of dumb in a way, and like not that complex. But to 10-year-old me, like I was intrigued by this idea of Paradise Theater and
Well, yeah.
what it was supposed to be about, which I guess is like, it shows the theater at the beginning when it's all brand new and everybody's excited, and then the end, the back of the record shows the album, and the theater closed down, it's all busted up, whatever. And supposedly that was about the transition in America from the 70s into the 80s, supposedly.
Okay.
So about maybe the decline, I don't know. I'm not sure what he was trying to get at. That's the thing about Styx. Their concepts are so vague sometimes that like I don't always know if I'm getting it or not, and then I'm thinking, so I don't know. I've always been a little bit confused by that.
I wonder, so oddly enough, I started watching this movie called 54 last night, about Studio 54 in New York.
Okay.
And it was right on the edge of like 1979, and it was about the recession in the 70s and going into the 80s, and like kind of how, that guy who ran that club, how things were kind of turning at that point. So maybe like that was kind of what Styx had in mind. I never really thought, what was going on during that time, because I wasn't
alive. Also,
alive.
so many 70s bands that were major in the 70s started their decline once the 80s started. I mean,
Right.
Kiss did, Styx did, a whole bunch of other bands. They just started sliding out of relevance at that point because they just couldn't handle the new decade, I guess.
Wait, Styx? I thought they were really popular in the 80s, like early 80s.
But okay, so Paradise Theater was their biggest album. This is their only number one
Oh,
that
okay.
they ever had. The next album they did was the one with Mr. Roboto.
Oh, okay.
That was a big record and a big tour. I saw him on that tour. It was like my second concert ever. I went with my mom. And I thought it was the coolest thing ever. Apparently, the guys in the band all hated it because it was like a theater show. They came out and they had lines and they did some sort of acting, and then they had a movie, and then the band came out and played. I mean, it was sort of, I thought at 12 years old, I thought it was kind of high concept,
Well,
but
when you're 12, like everything's amazing,
it broke up the band, so basically they ended by 83, 84. They were done. So their peak was probably at this point, 81, when they were doing this album.
Okay.
And with Too Much Time on My Hands, which I don't understand how that fits in with the concept. But anyways, at that point, Styx was like it for me. I didn't need any other bands. I obsessed over Styx. I bought all of their tapes. I mean, I was buying tapes at the time, except for that Paradise Theater. And the album, I just felt like it was so significant. And I have to say, by like 1984, 85, I was done with Styx. I got more into heavy metal, and I was into, Motley Crue and Kiss and all this kind of stuff. And I just kind of put Styx by the wayside, and I have largely ignored them ever since, until I got to like, maybe this age. And if I hear Styx on the radio, or, they do something like on Jimmy Fallon, where they did a spoofing of the Too Much Time on My Hands video a couple years ago.
Okay.
It was really hilarious. I'm like, well, that song's pretty good. I'm not a hater on it. I just listened to some of it, and I'm just like, wow, this is like really dumb sometimes. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah. I mean, I was listening to like the lyrics like that. Was it one, 2 penny, half a penny?
Yeah, a half penny, 2 penny.
Yeah. And I was like, what is going on here? Like, they're taking me on some sort of weird journey. And then like this guy's voice just kind of, it's like this monstrous voice that comes out of nowhere. And I don't know, it made me chuckle. So.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of them do. And then how does this fit into the concept? Like, how does She Cares? How does that fit into the decline of America, or what? I mean, that's what I'm saying. Styx is so confusing. It's sort of like one guy comes up with the concept, and then the other guys just throw in songs, and then they'll just, well, I guess it fits.
Maybe it's like, if there was like a decline and everything crazy going on, like the goodness of people that are like coming through and like showing like their kindness. I don't know. It could be something like that. She cares.
I know She Cares. We're probably putting too much thought into a Styx lyric anyways, but
yes.
Because of like, they probably didn't put that much thought into it. But it is hard. First of all, it's also hard to overestimate how big Styx was, because if a band a rock band appeals down to people who are like 10 and 11 years old, that's like as mainstream as it gets, you
Right.
know, because you don't see bands. I mean, even Green Day at their like 90s peak or whatever, I don't think 10-year-olds were buying that stuff. I still think it was a little bit older.
Oh, I was. Well, I guess
Really?
I was like 12 when I bought that album, or when it came out. So,
Well,
yeah.
Styx was so big. It was Styx, Journey, and REO Speedwagon, right?
Oh,
The
yeah.
major three, they were like the powerhouse bands in sort of pop, sort of rock, you know, radio rock, I guess is what
Yeah,
you could say. They
totally.
were the absolute kings. And I was right there with them. I mean, I saw REO Speedwagon, I saw Journey, I saw Styx, I saw the whole 9 yards.
Oh,
So
True Confessions. I saw when Journey went back out on tour with that new lead singer from the
mhm.
Philippines, who sounds exactly like Steve Perry. And then Styx was with them and Heart. So I was like, well, I went because I just had to like go witness this new amazing singer, and plus I love Heart. But I will say, like, I was kind of impressed with Styx performance. I am not a Styx fan, but I will say, like, they are truly talented. Like, I guess that's all the really credit I can give them.
Hey, look, I'm not a hater and of Styx. And you know, they meant something to me as a kid. They don't mean anything to me anymore. I wouldn't go to a concert probably now, but I saw them a bunch of times
Yeah.
in the 80s, and even once when, you know, they broke up in like 84 or something like that. They got back together in, I think, 90 or so. And I remember I was in college at that point, and I came home for spring break, and my mom like surprised me with Styx tickets. They were playing at the old music hall, which is the small room. You know, they
Yeah.
used to play the Civic, and now they're playing the music hall. But
Yeah.
she bought me the tickets, and so I went to the show, and you know, it was not the same, but whatever. I still think I will
Thanks,
stand.
Mom.
Yeah, I will stand by their album, The Grand Illusion and Pieces of Eight. Those were 77, 78. Those are, I think, still solid rock albums, not overly ridiculous lyrics. And they sort of had a message, a meaning to it. I'll still stand by those. Paradise Theater, I think, is beyond where they were really that.
But when you were 10, you know, and you thought it was like the best thing since sliced bread, you know, like, was it just kind of like, hey, this is a new music I've never heard before? Like, this is different? Is that why it was so
You know,
appealing to you?
I was a creature of the radio, you know? I mean, there was no internet back then. I sound like
Yeah.
back in my day, you know, whatever, but there was no internet back then. There was no other thing. If you wanted to go get music, you had to get on your bike and go to the store. And if, you know,
Right.
how much money does a 10-year-old have? Really? Not much. So for me, I listened to the radio pretty much every waking minute.
Yeah. Like
Uh,
most kids do before the internet age. Yeah.
Right. And so I used to hear Styx on the radio. I used to actually call Z92 and get in arguments with the DJs because they didn't like Styx and they didn't want to play them. And I'd be like, "You guys are dicks. Like I'm calling in to request this thing."
You
Like
called the DJ's dicks.
I called one guy a dick. I know that for sure.
Oh, you started out so young with it, Dave.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I really wanted to hear it, and it wasn't that it was so different. I mean, I don't know what I knew at 10. You know, I mean, whatever was on Z92, I at least I heard, I was, you know, available. I did say I thought that Styx was a little bit smarter than the average band, but then my other favorite was, I love that song "Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap" by AC/DC. Like every
Yeah.
time that would come on the radio, I try and tape it with my cassette, you know.
Oh yeah, gotta hit the record play. Gotta run across the room and do the
Right.
record play. Yeah.
So I don't know. Is that song really all that intelligent or what? I mean, I don't know. It's a good song, but who knows? So that was my initial attraction. I just thought they were a good band. They seemed smart. Not everyone liked them, so there was a
Yeah.
little bit of, you know, even though they were massively popular, just like Kiss in a way, there was this like people who didn't like them really didn't like them. And so if you identified with liking them, you were almost in this weird little club, I guess. I don't know, for lack of a better
I'm
term.
just holding this image in my head of 10-year-old Dave calling the radio station saying, "Yeah, can I get some sticks
Yeah.
going on? Can you put that
I
in
mean,
the?"
I don't remember specifically, but I remember calling like an afternoon guy on Z92 and requesting a Styx song. I don't remember which one. And the guy was just like, no. You know, and I'm like, what do you mean no? I mean, I'm requesting a song here. Like, what the fuck? And I don't remember whatever happened. That guy is gone. I mean, who knows? I don't even remember the DJ's name. But
Yeah.
yeah, that was one that story sticks out. I remember. I remember. So let's move on to your choice for your album that was pretty meaningful to you, and
Yeah.
you don't really feel that it is now.
Oh God. So I was going through all my old CDs and I was like, who is this? What is this? And so I saw this band S.T.U.N, S-T-U-N, at a Warped Tour in the early 2000s. And I thought their like show was just amazing. I thought they, just rocked the stage. I don't know what it was. It's a lot of yelling and a lot of the same words repeated over and over. I mean, I get it, don't get me wrong. I love like good punk like the Ramones who do a lot of repeated stuff, but I don't know what I was going through at that time in my like I don't even know if I was 21 yet. But I just remember like blasting this album like all the time to a point where like one of the tracks like would skip. You played it that often.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, ooh, Joey, what was going on? And it's just that I don't know. Like I think I was just one of those angry early 20-year-old girls who was just like, being a rebel, and it just was like a lot of yelling and screaming, and I don't know why I loved it so much. It clearly was speaking to me and whatever was going on in my life.
Well, it's interesting because I had never heard of this band, album, nothing. Like, and I
You know a lot of
immediately,
stuff. Like,
yeah, I mean, I'm familiar with a lot of things. This came out in '03, it looks like,
yeah,
and I was that was kind of my lost music period. I in the '90s I was working in the music business. I quit for like 3-4 years. I just didn't pay any attention to anything, and then I kind of snapped out of it maybe by
yeah,
'04 when I moved back to Omaha. So this just like completely was off my radar. Never heard it. I could definitely see why a label would sign them though. Just I listened to the album twice. I would imagine they'd be a good live band, jumping around, freaking out,
yeah.
whatever.
Great
In some
performer.
club, yeah, in a club in LA or whatever. And some guy's like, "Whoa, these guys are going to be huge," you know. Um, the name is funny. I mean, scream toward the uprising of nonconformity. Apparently, that's what S.T.U.N stands for. I didn't know that. Um, when I listen to it, I hear, like you said, a lot of the sloganeering and stuff, and very political, and
Yeah,
that made me think of Rage Against the Machine a little bit, because they
yeah,
were kind of like that. They jump around and scream and whatever, and they were ending at that point. So these guys were kind of coming into that period. But so you
yeah.
say
His
you did
voice.
see,
Go ahead.
I was gonna say you did see them live though.
I did see him live, and I remember just buying the album because I don't know, when you go to like those music festivals, the fun thing about them is discovering new music, and it was just kind of like one of those bands like, what's going on over there? So they really had an amazing stage presence. I will give them that. Like they were just really fun to watch, and I just remember falling, in love with that album, and clearly, yeah, it's like very political and rebellious, and I just thought it was great. But now I like listen to it, I'm like, ooh, no, no, no.
So did you get into the band to the point where like you'd read articles about them or were kind of
No,
knew
like
things
I
about them?
literally
No.
just was at that Warped Tour and saw them perform, like was kind of walking by, and I was like, who are these guys? Let me check it out. I kind of like, their vibe. And that was really it. Like I never heard of them before, kind of like I said, when you go to a music festival and you stumble upon that little band, you're just like, ooh, yeah, this is good. But I did find out that he was married to or was dating Alicia Silverstone, the
Hmm.
actress
Okay, that's
from
impressive.
What People as Clueless, which I love that movie. As
Hey,
a
I
90s.
saw Alicia Silverstone on Broadway in 2001 in
Okay.
oh my God, what was that movie? It was a stage adaptation. It was initially a play. It was oh fuck. It was it'll come to me. Anyways,
Okay.
it was also with the guy from the American Pie movies, who fucked the pie or whatever.
Jason Bigg.
It was Jason. It was him, Alicia Silverstone, and somebody else. They were the stars. I saw it on Broadway once in 2001 when I was
Okay.
in New York.
It
I
was
don't know,
good.
odd little tidbit there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, whatever. It was It was the it is such an obvious play, and I'm so drawing a blank on it right now. With Mrs. Robinson, and it was Dustin Hoffman was in the original,
The Graduate?
the Graduate. That's what it was.
Oh,
I saw the
they.
play of
Oh,
it
okay.
on Broadway, and Alicia Silverstone was the daughter.
Oh,
Biggs was
okay.
the
That would
Dustin
have been
Hoffman
good.
role, right?
Okay.
Anyways, okay, back to what you were saying. Sorry.
But yeah, I don't know, like that was, I just remember listening to that album very like on repeat, like for maybe like an entire year. I just loved it, you know, totally constantly in my CD player in my car. And I listen to it now and I'm like, this has no meaning to me whatsoever. I can't even get through it. Like I really try, like I forced myself to listen all the way through and I was like, God, I just can't. So.
Well, you know, like I said, I never heard of it. I listened to it for the first time this week, and yeah, it sounds very like early 2000s. It has that aggro feel, and
Yeah.
the political sort of sloganeering, which not everyone was doing. I mean, that's, you know, not every band was Rage Against the Machine. I mean, I think most people that listened to Rage Against the Machine had no idea what their real message was. You know, they're chanting shit and
Oh
killing
yeah.
in the you know, and they don't even
Very,
understand what
very
they're
punk. Yeah.
shouting. You know, so maybe that was the case with these guys. You know,
Maybe.
I don't know. It was interesting when you suggested it, and the first time I started listening to it, I was just like, what? You know, it was just very not what I was expecting. So
Right.
prior to this thing, to deciding that you wanted to use, how long had it been since you'd actually heard the album? Like since back in the day?
Probably since 2003.
Oh
Like
my
it
God.
had been many, many years. And yeah. So it probably had been like since 2003 since I listened to it because I was just like, oh man, I forgot about this. I forgot how much I love this and how much it meant to me and how I just played it on repeat. And now I'm like,
I
not
can't even get
much
through it.
anymore. Yeah.
So did any song, was it like, was okay to you when you played it? Or
Well,
just
I
like,
will say track 3, I have to look up, I should have had it up, but the third track, it's like Annihilation something.
Annihilation of the Generations. I got
Yeah,
it
it's
pulled up on
very
this.
like repetitive, incredibly repetitive, but that was like the song that I felt like was, you know, my jam. So, but yeah, so, no, wait, it's, I think that was the album.
Now,
Yeah.
did anyone from that band ever join other bands? Do you know, like, and like, oh, this guy then went on to play in such and such a band?
I never really invested any more time into them. Like, I probably moved on to something else. Like you know, you're like, oh, I discovered this, and then that was my new thing.
Right,
Of, you know,
right.
went into more like, shortly after that, I feel like I went through a really heavy like punk like phase. I was going through like some other albums. I'm like, I don't even remember these bands, and why do I have these albums where they don't even, you know, I don't even remember who they are. And then I slowly kind of went more into, because like 2003, that was kind of like when Interpol was coming around, like bands
Right.
like that, The Strokes, Yeah Yeah Yeahs, stuff like that was kind of coming around. So I was getting more into that alternative indie stuff after my punk phase. I still was like, you know, had my like punk thing going on, but totally got more into the alternative wave of all this awesome music that was coming in at the early 2000s. So like Queens of the Stone Age, good stuff like that.
Well,
So
it was a good era looking back.
yeah,
You know, like at the time, I wasn't, like I said, I wasn't feeling music because I had, you know, left the music business in a sort of an unhappy light, and just was sort
yeah,
of like, fuck music, you know, I just wasn't interested. But
yeah.
now that I go back and I hear some of these records, it was like, yeah, I mean, not the Stun one, I guess. I'll keep that one in the,
I mean,
hey, if anyone ever asks me, have you ever heard of this band? I can say, yeah, I have heard of them. I heard the
yeah.
record.
Well, yeah, so I never like kept in touch with them, but I was living in Chicago at the time, so I had access to all these amazing bands that were coming to town, and like kind of like I said during that start of the, you know, indie rock alternative. So I just kind of never really paid attention to where they were going, I should probably look that up. Maybe they're creating something really awesome now. Or
Well,
maybe
or maybe they're not, or maybe they're working at Subway. I mean, you just never know. Stuff just happens. I mean,
you look familiar,
yeah,
sir.
yeah. Did you used to sing about rebellion and
Annihilation.
annihilation and stuff? Yeah, was that you? I mean, Yeah, that would be pretty funny. But you know what? They probably one of these guys probably works at a record label or something.
Right.
Who knows what these guys do? But no, that's interesting. You
I'm gonna look
stumped
that
me.
up now. I'm
You
gonna find
stumped me on
out.
that one because I had legit never heard of Stun at all. Right? And I
Well, I'm
pride
glad I
myself
could
on hearing
introduce
most
you
stuff.
into something new into your music world.
Yeah, thank you for that.
You're
Uh,
welcome.
okay, so then the next part of the topic was going to be an album that when it came out initially just did nothing for you. You didn't really care for it for whatever reason, and now looking back, you realize, damn, that was a great album, and now it's like super significant to me.
Yeah,
And my choice for that one is Weezer, the Blue Album.
such a great album.
I know, and I
Such a
don't
great
even
album.
believe that I didn't like it at one point, but I didn't because 1990, what was it, four when this came out?
Yeah,
1994. So I was immersed in the indie rock world. And
right.
if you weren't around in the early 90s, it's hard to describe the huge distinction between what was an independent label and what was a major label and what your attitude about those bands on those labels was. It was hugely divisive. There was a like, you're a fucking sellout if you're on a major label.
Right.
You're a joke. You're a whatever.
Sure.
Unless you were a band like Nirvana or something where you started on the independent label and then you kind of moved your way up. It's like that's inevitable. At some point, you get to a bigger label. But when you started off like Weezer and nobody heard of you, and now you're on Geffen Records and you're on MTV, I viewed that suspiciously. Okay.
Oh,
Justified or not, right? I was just like, where the fuck do these guys come from? And now they're supposed to be peers with Pavement and all these bands I've been
all
listening to
these
for the
like
last couple of years.
classic. Yeah.
Right. And now Weezer is just a part of that scene. So I just assumed they were like a corporate band, put together by a record company.
Sure.
Maybe they signed Rivers Cuomo as a songwriter and they assembled a band behind it. Like group labels used to do that in the 60s and 70s and
Right.
stuff. Used to do
Yeah.
that. So I was completely dismissive of Weezer. I didn't want to hear anything about it. I didn't care. I had a lot of friends who were like, Dave, it's right up your alley. It's got that indie rock sound and it's like good songs. And the guy's a huge fan of Kiss. He references Kiss 2 or 3
Yeah.
times on the record.
In the garage. Yeah.
In the garage, right. So I'm like, I don't care. I don't like it. I don't want to hear this sweater song. I don't want to hear Buddy Holly. Nothing. And so I just decided I hated Weezer. Okay. And that's kind of how I existed for a little while, at least the next year or two. And I can remember it turning for me in a weird way because I was at a party. And I don't know if you ever had someone in your group of friends when you're young that always has like an acoustic guitar and is always like just kind of playing a little bit.
Yeah.
That one guy who's always, that guy at the party. So this guy who was my guy at that party, he started playing Say It Ain't So. Okay. And the people at the party.
And the crowd went wild.
Yeah, the crowd went crazy. The people at the party started all singing along to it, the Say It Ain't Okay. And I'm like, fuck, this is good. What is this? And then it was Weezer. And then I went back. I listened to that song first, realized, okay, I like that song. And then I gradually started, letting up on my hatred of them. And then Pinkerton came out and it was like, fuck, these guys are great. I don't know why there was any hatred for me. And I love the Blue Album. And it's an album that I've played still to this day, once a month or something like that for a 25-year-old album. You don't do that.
Oh, it's so good. Yeah. That surprised me when you said that you didn't like that. I was like, wow. Like, I was not expecting that would be your album, because for someone who obviously doesn't have the amount of music that you have collected, I think that album's like fantastic.
It is. And, I was just straight up wrong on that. And I chalk a lot of that up to it was a prevailing attitude at that time. And, I was starting my label in 1994 and I was fierce about this whole independent thing and like, fuck you if you're these corporate labels and all this. That was part of my attitude towards the Weezer album. Was just like what was going on at that time.
Total like,
But it makes sense in my head. Like I get it. I know where I'm coming from. But so
The Weezer album, yes, the Blue album.
right. So that was my attitude about it. It really wasn't based on what the album was. It was based on what the album wasn't, which was an independent release. And I
Sure.
was judging it unfairly. And I did that to Beck. I did that to Rage Against the Machine. I did that to a couple other bands who I initially dismissed because I never heard, I'm Mr. I know everything, and I never heard of them until they were on a major label. So they must not be shit, you know? And so I would just be dismissive until I heard something that connected, and then it was like, okay, I guess they aren't shit. I was wrong. And I had to reevaluate a couple artists, but the most prominent one was Weezer, and it's most definitely this album, which now I cherish as one of my favorites and one of the top 10 albums of the 90s without question.
Totally.
It's a stone cold classic.
The world has turned and left me here. I think that's probably like one of my favorites on that album. My name is Jonas. I mean, that intro alone is just classic. Yeah, it's so good. So Say It Ain't So is the song that made you change your mind.
That was it.
A guy playing acoustic at a party.
It's just some random guy at a party with an acoustic guitar started playing it, and I connected with it that way, and it was like, there it goes. I mean, the power of the song. It didn't have anything to do with the band, their presentation, what label they were on, were they on MTV, whatever.
Yeah.
It's the power of the tune. So.
No, so good.
There we go with that one. Now yours was an album that you didn't like initially.
Well,
you do like. Explain this one. Say what it is.
So
first.
this was hard for me because I love Depeche Mode. But never, so I bought this album, but maybe only listened to like one track. And I was like,
Playing the Angel.
Playing the Angel, sorry. The Depeche Mode, Playing the Angel. And I maybe listened to like one track. I'm like, oh yeah, this is good, but never really invested too much time into it. And then I went to see a documentary by Depeche Mode. It was about fans whose lives were changed by Depeche Mode. Like it could have been any song, any album. And someone like brought up that album, or it was like shown, maybe they didn't bring that album up, but I was like, oh, I have that album. I'm going to revisit that. And I was like, holy crap. Like, this is amazing. Like, and there are a couple of songs that I feel like are just really resonate with me. And I just think it's really meaningful and means a lot to me through just like personal reasons. So
it wasn't so much that you disliked it, you
no,
just more or less overlooked it.
Yeah.
Okay. In a catalog from a band that you already liked, but the new album comes out, it's like, it's okay, whatever, you kind of move on. And now it's sort of like later on you realize, damn, that was like a really good record from them.
So 6 months ago, I saw that documentary and I was just kind of like, ho hum, and it was cute. It was like a good little documentary. And, but yeah, so revisit that within like the past year. And I just think it's amazing. I don't know every single Depeche Mode album. I know they have so much work and continue to put out work. And what made me realize is like how long they had already been a band and are still coming up with new material that is still awesome.
And they don't sound like they used to when they started. They definitely have evolved.
Yeah. And I don't know, like just some of the songs on there, just like I said, really resonate with me. And I think maybe that's why it just has so much meaning to me right now. Like The Pain That I'm Used To is the first track. And I don't know, I've, for the past like 6 years, I've dealt with like severe anxiety, and listening to that song and like the lyrics, I was just like, holy crap. Like, I feel like the synthesizers and just the loudness, I feel like it just kind of like, gives you like this frequency of energy that kind of takes your mind off whatever pain you're going through. And just like some of the lyrics, like the key is to question of control. It's all about controlling what's, going on in your head. And there's just some really powerful lyrics in there. And that really kind of helped me just what was going on in my life, and helped me kind of, wrangle some things that was going on personally. So it's just such a hard, like, it's just an intense sound, and it's so awesome. Just like the build up into that synthesizer, it just sounds like I don't know. it's just like this powerhouse of noise.
When I
And
when I
first track is
listen,
just amazing.
yeah, when I listened to the record, because I was not familiar with it, I have a couple of Depeche Mode albums, but I did not know this one, and I didn't recognize. I just went through the titles. I was like, I don't know which one was the hit, you know. But I
Yeah.
put it on, and I liked it. It definitely. I've always had a complicated relationship with Depeche Mode, okay,
Yeah.
because I'm an old guy and I remember them in the 80s when they were
Yeah.
doing People Are People and the real synthy stuff where it was just there's no other instrumentation but like a keyboard. And to me, when I was a kid back then in the 80s, I was more of a rock guy. I liked heavy metal. I
Yeah.
liked that kind of stuff. And I didn't like really synthy stuff. And this sounded like to me was made on a computer, like the old stuff, like People Are
Sure.
People and whatnot. So I just kind of dismissed them. And then in the 90s, I was made aware of something. I think they had a live concert video where they filled up a stadium in Los Angeles with like 80,000 people. I was like, I had no idea Depeche Mode was that huge and had resonated with that many people. I thought they were like a culty English band that, you know, only college kids listened to and like nobody else really paid attention. I didn't realize how massive they were. I gave them a second listen. And about the time when they came up with Personal Jesus, you know, when the sound sort of changed and they had a little bit of guitars and stuff
Yeah.
like that, I kind of started saying, all right, I'm a moderate Depeche Mode fan, you know.
Yeah.
So this album was unfamiliar to me, so I gave it a listen from the start, and it was an enjoyable listen. I couldn't really hear the lyrics too much because it was my first time going through it, so
Sure.
you know I wasn't really sure what they were saying or what it was about or what have you. But it was an interesting record. It's something I'll probably revisit at some point because I am reopening, you know, my mind on groups like Depeche Mode
Yeah.
and I reevaluated The Cure and some others that you know it's so hard to describe because or you know we have a bit of an age difference. So in the 80s, you know, in Omaha, you could not hear English music on the radio.
Sure. Yeah, I bet.
They just didn't play it. MTV played it. You could see The Cure and Depeche Mode on MTV, but that was it. And I was a radio kid and I never heard that stuff, you know, like in Omaha, British music stopped in like 1975 or something, you know, and then they didn't play any of those bands after that.
Yeah.
And so Depeche Mode was kind of one of those bands where if they had played it on the radio more often when I was growing up, it probably would have incorporated into my world better. And I would, you know, maybe be a bigger fan. But bands like Depeche Mode, The Smiths, those groups, they might as well have been from, you know, from Russia or something. And they were just gone.
Yeah, they weren't really familiar. Yeah.
No, no. So, you know, those are my thoughts on that album. It's interesting, you know, now I'm seeing, you know, I was reading a little bit online about it and saying it's like, yeah, I think people now reevaluated that record and realized, oh yeah, this was like really good, you know?
The Playing the Angel.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of I think the song Suffer Well is really good. They redo that I think it's a song by Blind Willie Johnson, that blues gospel singer. The John the Revelator is like a really interesting take on that. So I like how they kind of pull stuff from everywhere. Yeah, I think there's a lot of good stuff on there. Like it's just really, I don't know, personal and meaningful to me, and I think it's a really awesome record. Precious is really good. I think it's about divorce, but I'm the oldest of 4 kids, and it reminds me of my younger siblings for some reason. So I'm much older than them, so I think it's just kind of like this little I don't know, tribute to them. It's just kind of like a little nice song that I think just reminds me of them. So there's a lot of like little things in there that it's why this album's like really meaningful to me. And I never, I gave it much attention. Maybe just like one song, I'm like, oh yeah, that was good, and done. So
look, it happens. I mean, with bands that I've liked for a long time, there is that sort of thing of like, heard it all before, or I'm buying it out of loyalty because I've already liked this group before. So yeah, they put out something new. I'm gonna go get it. It's probably not going to be that good. You know, their peak was whatever, 10 years ago. And so you do kind of overlook stuff. Or it's the opposite for me where sometimes I get hypercritical of artists I like. You know, like someone like Bob Mould is one of my all-time favorites. He puts out a new record. I expect it to be fucking awesome every time. And if it's not, it's like,
Bob Mould is Husker Du,
yeah,
right?
yeah. Sugar and Solo, yeah.
Okay.
Wait, did I go see Bob
Wait,
Mould
were we
with
at that show together?
I saw Bob Mould with you at Slowdown. I feel like. At least I saw you there. Didn't I?
There, because my friend got tickets because like she knew the guitar player or something who was playing with Bob Mould, and I was like, okay. I really don't know. I know like maybe a couple songs by him, and
Oh, that's funny.
you know a little bit of Husker Du. I mean, I think I have one Husker Du album, and but yeah, I think I remember. But I see you at every show, Dave.
I saw you at that show. Yeah, I think I saw
you at almost every show, pretty much.
So,
But yeah,
go ahead. I'm
Depeche
sorry.
Mode, great.
Yeah. So if you had any final thoughts, I mean, we've been going for a good like 40 minutes. We've got a lot on here. So if you got any final thoughts or anything you'd like to add, other than that, I think,
I really enjoyed this, Dave. I was looking forward to it so much. You know me, it excites me, so I could talk forever about music. So anytime.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for doing this.
Yeah.
And
I enjoyed it.
We're going to do another one for sure. All right, there you go. You stuck around to the end. Much appreciated. Thanks a lot. Leave a comment below with your thoughts if you've had any experiences kind of like this. I hope you dug what you watched. Thanks a lot, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.